Mangwana ni mwalelepo fukenjani, Krekwas Vanave Africa. Welcome to Africa Good Morning, the news and current affairs show which remains your portal into Africa and the world's most potent stories. Today, we're going to be looking at several stories spanning the continent, and these are the ones we'll be zoning in on, of course, with some focus on the Iran war. Africa fuel prices spike as governments respond to Iran war pressure. Donald Trump signals exit from Iran war while weighing NATO withdrawal. South Africa deploys army to crime hotspots amid mixed reactions. Unza, University of Zambia student drowns in campus incident during sewer works. Cyril Ramaphosa raises investment target to 3 trillion, and this was at the Invest South Africa Summit. Coca-Cola commits $1 billion investment to expand South Africa operations. Yes, that and some economic news as well stemming from Zambia and Zimbabwe. It is a packed show indeed. Thank you for joining us just before we break off for Easter. My name is Ashwin Bedi. Top stories shortly. In a world where politicians promise the moon and deliver potholes, where democracy sometimes arrives in camouflage and ballots often look like formalities, one show dares to laugh with Africa, at Africa, and sometimes for Africa. This is Second Take, your weekly dose of political satire with an African soul and a global edge. From coups disguised as press briefings to ministers moonwalking past accountability, we serve the real news with sharper writing. Each week we bring you the TikTok of the week because sometimes the revolution is vertical, and the heartwarming moment of the week to remind us that not everything is burning. We also sit down with the bold, the brilliant, and the brave, voices that question power, stir thought, and spark laughter. Because when the headlines are wild, the leaders are louder, and the truth is lost in translation, we all need a second take. African governments are enforcing sharp increases in fuel prices as the Iran war drives global costs higher and raises fears of inflation across the entire continent. Many countries remain heavily dependent on imported petroleum products, leaving them exposed to supply disruptions. South Africa moved to ease pressure by reducing its fuel levy for 1 month after trade unions and business groups called for intervention. In Ghana, National Petroleum Authority raised minimum price floors for early April, pushing petrol up about 15% and diesel nearly 19%, while President John Mahama signaled possible relief measures, including margin reductions and levy reviews. Malawi imposed steeper hikes, with petrol and diesel rising over 30% following earlier increases between January and March, similar to Zimbabwe. And Tanzania also raised fuel price caps by roughly 33% while maintaining supply stability. Now, similarly, well, not similar, but more or less attached and related to this story, President Donald Trump of the United States has indicated that the country could exit the Iran war soon, while keeping the option open for targeted strikes if necessary. Speaking ahead of a scheduled national address, he suggested the conflict could wind down quickly, stating the U.S. could leave once objectives were met. Trump also revealed he is considering withdrawing the United States from NATO, expressing dissatisfaction with the alliance's support during the conflict. The International Energy Agency warned that global oil supply disruptions could double this month compared to March, intensifying pressure on energy markets. Trump said Iran had sought a ceasefire, though Tehran denied this, while mediation efforts by Pakistan have yet to yield results. The conflict has disrupted key routes such as the Strait of Hormuz, affecting fuel shipments globally. And as we know, the Strait of Hormuz has about 20% of the world's fuel funneling through it. Now, we swing to South Africa, one army to another. South Africa has deployed its army to several crime-affected areas, and this is to support police efforts in tackling violent crime, illicit mining, and gang activity. President Cyril Ramaphosa authorized the deployment of 2,200 soldiers across 5 provinces, with operations set to continue for a year. Initial troops were sent to Gauteng in March, followed by a broader rollout to other provinces from April. Authorities say the move aims to restore order in communities struggling with high crime rates, including areas where daily killings remain a serious concern. Residents have expressed mixed views, with some welcoming the increased security, while others fear the presence of soldiers may escalate tensions. Experts caution that the military is trained for combat rather than community policing, raising concerns about long-term effectiveness. Previous deployments have produced temporary results, with crime often returning once soldiers withdraw, highlighting ongoing challenges in addressing underlying causes. Emmanuel Bwalia, an 18-year-old Zambian student, unfortunately drowned yesterday on the University of Zambia campus. Here is our correspondent in Lusaka, Max Situla, giving us that story.
Thank you very much for having me. The University of Zambia was established in 1965. It became operational in 1966. Last week, images and videos emerged on social media platforms showing the poor state of sanitation facilities at the university. However, officials from the university, when they went on a public media, dispelled the images and did assure members of the public that the situation was not as bad as it was portrayed on social media. However, on Monday evening, the students said enough is enough, and they decided to hold a peaceful protest within the university premises. It was after this protest that President Hakainde Hichilema on Tuesday afternoon convened an emergency meeting to discuss, among other issues, the poor state of sanitation facilities at the University of Zambia. On Tuesday evening, or late evening on Tuesday, the Zambia National Service, which was directed by President Hakainde Hichilema to go on site and resolve the problem, moved within the university to begin to do temporary works that can collect the situation to prevent the spread of diseases, among other issues. However, on the same Tuesday evening, one of the students drowned in one of the pit holes which the Zambia National Service were working on in their way to unblock blocked sewer system. This provoked the students' population, who on Tuesday evening through to Wednesday morning were protesting, complaining about the death of their friend. On the same Wednesday, the students wanted to march to State House to go and seek the audience of President Hakainde Hichilema, but they were prevented. And yesterday afternoon, the Minister of Education, Mr. Douglas Shakalima, addressed the students, assuring them that the situation at the university will be addressed as soon as possible. But his message or assurance to the students is not something that the students are pleased, because they are saying our friend has died because of the pit hole which was dug within the university as the ZNS were working to address the poor sanitation facilities. That was not the only issue. The students also requested their current and present leadership of the Students' Union to step down from their positions, because according to them, the leadership of the union has not been representing them. Hence, they must step down to usher in a new executive. The current state of affairs is something that caused public panic, because the students went to the Great East Road, and usually when they go to the Great East Road, sometimes it becomes chaotic as the students will riot, damage public vehicles, anything that they can lay their hands on. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Mike Situla, for that very timely report. I was just having a look at the updates with regards to that story as of early this morning, and we know that the Zambian government has now released 23 million kwacha in order to address sanitation and water issues at the University of Zambia. And we certainly from Africa Good Morning would like to pass on our condolences to the student and the families involved. So, those have been the top stories on Africa Good Morning. After the break, we swing over to South Africa, zoning in on Cyril Ramaphosa's words around the Invest in South Africa conference, which includes him pushing the number from 2 trillion to 3 trillion. What number, you may ask? Stick around. See you after the weather. President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa has increased the country's investment target from 2 trillion rand to 3 trillion rand, signaling a stronger push toward economic growth and expanded investment ambitions. Speaking under the Invest SA campaign, he emphasized the country's improving attractiveness to investors, highlighting ongoing reforms and positive results. Now, framing the economy as a growing opportunity, Ramaphosa also likened South Africa's progress to a blooming environment that draws increased interest. Here are 2 excerpts from President Cyril Ramaphosa's words at the Invest in South Africa Summit. Now, as we know, the message underscores broader strategy focused on growth, partnership, and long-term prosperity, reinforcing the government's drive to accelerate investment and unlock economic potential. We'll certainly be bringing you those videos shortly. However, prior to that, let's talk about Coca-Cola, which has also decided to already invest in South Africa. Coca-Cola and its authorized bottlers, Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa and Coca-Cola Peninsula Beverages, will invest 17.6 billion rand through 2030 to expand production capacity in the country. The announcement was made by Luis Felipe Avelar, president of the company's Africa operating unit. We're going to take a quick break on Africa Good Morning before we return with the news from South Africa. All right, as promised, here are the words from President Cyril Ramaphosa as he was speaking at the Invest in South Africa Summit, where he, amongst other things, said that South Africa's investment target had moved from 2 trillion rand to 3 trillion.
Now, this is against the backdrop of me having been influenced by a number of my colleagues who have said, no, President, We shouldn't, target for a higher target. We should be a bit modest, and let's not go over ourselves. Now, we now at the first year of this long journey that we started. We have said we will have 2 trillion. Now I make a mistake again, I say 3. But tonight I'm changing the target. As president, I'm changing the target from 2 trillion to 3 trillion. That is the new target now. Now I'm glad that my ministers are even applauding more. It means that they now have a new mandate. And the new mandate is that we must now go for 3 trillion and not 2 trillion anymore. So the target has changed. I'm often told that, oh no, the president, he doesn't really take decisions and all that. Now I have decided. Government, and including the business community, has been doing a great deal of work to mobilize the investments that have been announced here. I can start off with Sasol, for instance, which is our homegrown company. The CEO was telling me that, President, if we had not had some of the reforms and some of the legislative processes that will enable this 60 billion rand investment, and he told me himself during the tea break, we would not have made it. We've made this investment. In fact, last night when we were having dinner with those who are investing more than 10 billion, he said, we're making this investment because of what government has put into effect. Now, the reforms that we have been implementing have enticed many companies that are here today. They have encouraged many companies to want to come and invest. When a country is uninvestable, investors stay away. That's the law of economics. And when a country becomes more attractive and starts blooming like a flower, it attracts the bees that come.
Now, Zambia declared a national fuel emergency and introduced measures to cushion citizens from rising global oil prices. The government has zero-rated VAT and suspended excise duty on petrol and diesel for 3 months starting April 1, 2026. Here's Information Minister Cornelius.MY.NA speaking on ZNBC.
President of the Republic of Zambia, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, called for the 4th Cabinet Special Meeting today, Tuesday, 31st March 2026 at State House to deliberate on matters aimed at enhancing national economic and social development for the good of the people of Zambia, and came up with the following resolution. That is to say, zero rating of value-added tax, VAT, suspension of excise duty on petrol and diesel, and the declaration of the current fuel supply situation in the country as an emergency. Cabinet approved that A, zero rating of value-added tax, VAT, and suspension of excise duty on petrol and diesel imports for a period of 3 months, effective 1st April 2026, and B, declaration of the current fuel supply situation as an emergency. These measures are short-term interventions to mitigate the impact of escalating international crude oil prices on Zambia's economy. Cabinet noted with serious concern the continued conflict in the Middle East, which has led to disruption in global oil supply chains, resulting in increased international fuel prices and exerting upward pressure on domestic pump prices. Given that Zambia has not been are spared from the impact of the fuel supply disruption, it is important for government to inform its citizens on the happenings regarding the fuel situation and the measures government is taking to cushion household businesses and key productive sectors from the adverse effects of rising fuel costs. In this regard, Cabinet has approved to zero rate value-added tax VAT and suspend excise duty on petrol and diesel for a period of 3 months. The measures take effect from midnight tonight.
Now, across the Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, former finance minister, lawyer and opposition leader Tendai Biti accuses the Zimbabwean government of exploiting the fuel crisis. Here he is in his own words.
It's a very difficult period in our history, in our country. The working people are suffering. There's a barrage of attacks on the working people of Zimbabwe. The price of fuel has been increased by more than 60% to $2.20 a liter, which has now become the most expensive fuel in sub-Saharan Africa. This is notwithstanding that we had over 3 million liters of fuel already stocked at Feruka and Masasa, so that the recent fuel increases are nothing but speculative, punitive measures against the people of Zimbabwe. We could and should have benefited from the buffer, the reserve buffer of fuel that we already have in the country. So the irony is that countries like Zambia, whose fuel actually passed through Zimbabwe, now have fuel that is considerably less than that of Zimbabwe. As I'm talking to you right now, nurses are on strike because of poor and paltry wages. Teachers have given notice of to go on strike in terms of the Labour Act because of poor salaries. Business people, contractors, they are all crying because the government has declared that all services and products will now be paid in a local currency, yet they sourced their commodities, they sourced their costs in US dollars. So the economy faces a massive slowdown, a period of stagflation, a crisis of underaccumulation, thanks to corruption, thanks to mismanagement. But the ordinary Wananchi, the ordinary citizen, faces a serious clampdown. Since the publication of Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 of 2026, we have seen a massive clampdown against the citizens of Zimbabwe and closure of all political space. This is despite the fact that Zimbabweans have a right to freedom of expression codified in the Constitution, have a right to freedom of.
All right, that's going to round up our broadcast. We are going to return on Tuesday. However, tomorrow on Friday during this slot, do watch our Commonwealth Day special. And on Monday, do have a look at our Brave and Building documentary, which is centered around 36 voices stemming from Namibia. DSTV 285, GOTV 25, 1am2.com, Network Media Hub, NTVAFRIKA.MY.NA is precisely where you can watch the show. Do enjoy your Easter.
"36 years ago, a nation stood at the edge of possibility, not just born but claimed. Since then, Namibia has been shaped not only by history, but by its people. Faces, voices, journeys, some who built, some who questioned, some who created, all who carried something forward. From quiet resilience to bold expression, from everyday moments to defining milestones. This is a nation in motion, Not one story, but many. Not one voice, but 36. Each one reflecting where we have been and where we are going. Because Namibia is not only what it remembers, it is what it continues to become. Brave and bolding. 36 years, 36 voices. A reflection of a nation through its people.